Hello and welcome to Archveldor's Hacks with Archveldor and his amazing hacks. This is another exploit rundown. For those of you that didn't see the first one, it's quite simple and it's a basic departure from the normal type of thing I do. Normally, when I show you an exploit, I take you through it from beginning to end and actually show you it in practice. This video gives me a bit more freedom to speculate about things, talk about what's going on generally in the exploit community, discuss some theories and some possibilities and even some wild rumors about what's going on in the darkest corners of Warcraft. The first thing I want to talk to you about is an exploit I've been developing for some time. It's rather similar to the Icicle exploit that you may remember. I know about a third of you actually subscribe to the channel on the basis of the Icicle exploit. This had a similar property in that it allowed you to use game-breaking buffs and transport them across zones. Normally speaking, there are lots of buffs within Warcraft which allow you to do game-breaking damage, but generally speaking they're restricted to a specific zone. So this exploit has the property of being able to bypass that particular countermeasure that Blizzard instituted. And the exploit works like this. You're going to need two characters to make this work. You need one of the Horde faction, one of the Alliance faction. And you need an Affliction Warlock and a Hunter. Doesn't matter what spec the Hunter is. And the way it works is this. The Warlock will cast a spell, a damage over time spell, on the Hunter's pet. The Hunter then dismisses the pet. Then both the Warlock and the Hunter go somewhere where they want to do a game-breaking amount of damage. So, for example, a city boss or a world boss or a rare elite. And then the Hunter will resummon his pet. The Warlock will use his soul swap ability. And then he will be able to transfer the dots, the damage over time spells, that he put on the Hunter pet onto anything in the immediate vicinity. The reason we're doing this is that the Warlock can then do much higher damage than he would be able to normally. For example, there's a buff in the Western Plaguelands which you get when you attack a couple of dozen bears in that location. And the buff is called Survival Instincts. Survival Instincts, check it out on Wowhead, it's quite interesting. Survival Instincts increases your size and it also increases your haste by 100%. And the interesting thing about Survival Instincts is only lasts 7 seconds, but it stacks infinitely. So you can get every bear in the zone attacking you, and you can get maybe 2,500 haste, and that amount of haste will allow you to create a DOT which will do millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of damage, depending how many of the buff you can stack on you. And Survival Instincts is a buff that can't be taken out of the zone normally. Some players very early on in, I believe it was Cataclysm Beta, actually did that and it got fixed very quickly. But this method will allow you to effectively take the buff out of the zone. You're not actually taking the buff out of the zone, but what's happening is when you cast your damage over time spell under the effect of Survival Instincts, so you'd have the two characters, the Hunter and the Warlock, in the Western Plaguelands, surrounded by these bears attacking the Warlock. He's just aggroed all of them. So the Warlock has the buff on him. He then casts the damage over time spell on the Hunter pet. You then both leave the Western Plaguelands and go to some world boss, perhaps in Pandaria. Then the Hunter whips out his pet again, and the massively overpowered damaged over time spell is still ticking away. The Warlock uses his soul swap, transfers it onto the city boss, and wackiness ensues. Now, there's one difficulty I haven't mentioned here, and that is that the Hunter pet will probably die almost instantly. So there's a couple of ways around this. Firstly, and most obviously, you can cast Bestial Wrath on the hunter pet. Now, with something like a haste buff, the hunter's going to have to be lightning fast to stop the pet dying, and that's maybe a little impractical. With other types of damage, maybe not so much. There's an alternative to that, which is simply to cast it on a player, and the player himself can make himself invulnerable in a number of ways. The obvious way to do that would be to take the cracked talisman from Fixel Lonely Heart in the Jade Forest, which will allow you to stay invulnerable for 20 seconds and has 3 charges so that they can be cast back to back. And that will keep the player alive. Difficulty with that, of course, is that you have zoning issues because you have a limited time. The beauty of using the hunter pet is that you can summon and resummon and dismiss at will, so you can store up those DOTs indefinitely. And the final method is to go into the Black Temple and get to the boss, the Essence of Anger. The Essence of Anger will cast a spell on you called Spite, and Spite will actually keep you alive, keep you invulnerable, in fact, immune to all damage for 6 seconds. So if you get that on your pet, and then use it for our purposes with the Warlock putting the damage over time spell on the pet, then the pet should survive for a further 6 seconds, which should just be long enough. Okay, now in practice this exploit is going to be quite difficult to implement, and I just haven't actually been able to put together, assemble a team of people who are patient and disciplined enough to do it within the very limited time frame we have available, because we're coming up to Warlords of Draenor. This blaxploit will no longer be possible. So if you want to give it a go, there may be an amazing power there. I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun with it, but be warned, this is very advanced shit. So if you can pull it off, respect to you and good luck to you. I'd like to hear about it. Okay, so let's move on. And as in the first exploit rundown, I'm going to be covering some stuff from the Warcraft bug report forums. And the first interesting finding I just saw the other day is to do with the Priest's Dominate Mind ability. Apparently when this is used in PvP against a Warlock, then it has the effect of breaking any soul link effects that were caused by the Warlock. So for example, if you cast Grimoire of Sacrifice, that's just gone when Dominate Mind is cast. And that has a pretty dramatic effect on the meta game of PvP. It has been exploited at the very highest level, I believe. Another potential exploit from the bug report forums concerns wintergrasp. This is less cut and dried than the previous example. Essentially what happened was one poster was queued for wintergrasp, entered wintergrasp, and received the tenacity buff. Now, those of you that never played wintergrasp in its heyday probably won't know that tenacity is a buff that was designed to redress the balance if you got an imbalance of Horde or Alliance players. And this guy found that he received a tenacity buff which gave him 1.3 million health. And he then went into a raid and noticed that other people were commenting, accusing him of being a hacker because he still had that 1.3 billion health. And obviously the tenacity buff, something had gone wrong and had travelled with him through into the raid. Now, I tried to recreate this and I was unable even to get the tenacity buff within wintergrasp, let alone take it outside. But there's clearly some very interesting potential there. So I thought I'd mention this because those of you who like to follow these things up and investigate may just uncover something truly amazing. Now I just want to talk a little bit about the upcoming expansion, Warlords of Draenor. And This is enormously exciting for the exploit community in particular. Reason is simply that everything is broken when you get a new expansion for some time afterwards. Just so many different possibilities, interactions with old content, things that were never designed to work together, so many different permutations that the game developers can't possibly prevent the existence of any bugs or even major game-breaking bugs. And there's one thing in particular I'd recommend that you do when preparing for Warlords of Draenor. That is, keep your cast bar full of icons. Every single ability you have, put it on your taskbar. The reason is that you get situations where an ability like Thrash, which was amended or removed for druids in Cataclysm, still remained in the game architecture, in the source code, and was still usable by players who had it on their cast bar. That type of opportunity may just recreate itself. It can't hurt to leave everything on your cast bar before you log out for the last time in Mists of Pandaria. Just before we finish up, I just wanted to address a comment that really got me thinking by Zlozel on my Icicles video. And Zlozel was saying that the Icicles exploit was not really an exploit, it was just an application of Frost Mastery as designed by the Blizzard developers. That really got me thinking. And I just wanted to say a little about what we do in the exploit community and why we do it. And obviously this is, a very personal thing, but I have never seen the use of exploits as cheating. There are obviously areas where it crosses over into the unethical, or clearly it's going against Blizzard's terms of service. There are certain things I don't do. I don't judge these people who do these things, but I don't really use things like third-party programs. I don't use actual programming hacks to alter the software in any way. I don't even use lag, really. If you want to do that, that's fine. I find it very interesting. But for me, I like to work within the game insofar as is possible. And to me, I never really thought about it in too much detail other than it was intellectually fascinating. But thinking about it, I think Zlozler is absolutely right. With the vast majority of the exploits I come up with and other exploiters come up with, we're really just playing the game as it is. Now, Blizzard may have some idea in their minds about how the game's supposed to be played, but they've never really come out with a clear and consistent set of rules about what is and isn't allowed. And indeed, they apply these rules quite arbitrarily. You may know the story about the world first kill of the Lich King, where apparently the achievement was taken away from them because they were apparently exploiting, and then they came back and did it without the relevant exploit and said, it was nothing to do with us, it was your shitty software, Blizzard. And Blizzard reinstated them, and the same thing happened with a spellsteal exploit that was used to get a world first level 90 in Mist and Pandaria, where again Blizzard looked into it, took it away, and then decided to give it back again and said they hadn't really broken the rules. And you just think with that, should I not take advantage of the game as it actually is? Because at some stage Blizzard might decide that it wasn't fair, but then they might not, or they might decide that it wasn't fair and then decide that it is. Or should we just play the game to the best of our abilities? And I think that's really what it's about. Another thing I'd like to add is that I believe in many ways exploiters have more of a knowledge and an in-depth immersion into Azeroth than most other players, because you see, we experience the world in a way that most players don't. Most players seem to just hang around in Stormwind or Orgrimmar, just waiting for stuff to happen, waiting for current raid content, or playing PvP. they don't really go out into the world that much, particularly not the old world, because there just really is no reason to. Apart from sort of transmogging and achievements and stuff like that. But they don't really connect with the world in the way the exploit community does, because exploiters are constantly exploring the most remote regions of Azeroth, interacting with all manner of creatures that most players only ever encounter once, if at all, during some quest that they finish in 2 minutes. And I feel, in that sense, we are truly a community that appreciates Azeroth probably more than any other. Okay, so that wraps up another exploit rundown. Hope you found it interesting, useful, and enjoyable. If you did, please subscribe. Thank you for watching. Take care. This has been Archveldor.